Yes.
Yeah, baby. All right, here we go. Let's do this. You can grunt if you want to, Matt. Oh my God. Yes. Holy mackerel. Welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. This is the place where we talk about podcast audio production in great depth. We go very deep. It's all about the audio production. We don't talk about marketing or anything like that. My name is Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for lots of companies, and also I teach at Podcast Engineering School, which is my school. And every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We really talk shop. And I have a background in the music business, engineering audio and engineering music. And since I entered podcasting, what I found was that a lot of people in podcasting, they just don't have the audio knowledge and skills to produce really high quality audio, which is understandable. So that's why I'm doing this show, to help you learn how to produce better audio. Of course, Barry is with me.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh baby. And you can listen to the show everywhere, obviously, in Podcast Engineering School. We do a semester every quarter, so check the website to see when the next semester of Podcast Engineering School is. It's podcastengineeringschool.com. And I recently started a group, a podcast production community on Locals. See what happens when you drink coffee right before you go on the air? I mean, Matt, does that happen to you with coffee?
Yes, or if I have cream in my coffee, and then if I make the mistake of then having to do like a voiceover or something like that, it's not great. It's phlegm and mucus, and it's not great. So, rookie mistake, Chris.
Yeah, again, it's been a few months. Maybe I'm reverting back to bad habits. I don't know.
No, I totally get it. Trust me, I'm with you.
But Matt, I'm going to introduce you in a second, but I just want to mention to everybody, the podcast production group on Locals is really shaping up and gaining a lot of energy and momentum. It's just awesome. So go join it. It's free. You can join for free and you can see everything. Podcastproduction.locals.com. I'll say that again. Podcastproduction.locals.com. It's just so much fun. I'm posting every day, and there's so many other amazing podcast engineers and editors in there. It's really amazing. Anyway, and can you tell I'm psyched about it, Matt Powell? Jesus.
I can tell, as you should be. I am too.
That's awesome, man. All right, so Matt Powell, you are the senior audio engineer for Mission.org. Now, I just want to, say that again. Senior audio engineer. So
senior. Guess
what? Everybody listening who has never taken any training in audio engineering, this is a good episode for you. So, I don't know. Matt, do you think when you hear, like for me, when I hear experts in any field talking about their craft and their expertise, I feel like I'm learning just by listening to them talk.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think audio specifically is one of those fields where it doesn't matter how long you've done it for, you will always learn something new. Even if it's maybe like a basic technique, maybe you did it years ago and you forgot about it, and then someone who has only been doing it for a year does it on an episode, and you're like, oh, that's right. That's right. Actually a really dope technique, and I should probably use that. And it's much easier than what I'm doing.
Right.
So, yeah, anytime you hear an expert, their experience is their expertise. So you can always grab something from anyone, regardless of where they're at in the spectrum. But, yeah, it's always a blast to listen to people who have been in the industry for a long time. You longer than myself, for sure. But that's why I'm pumped to talk to you, because I'm sure I'll learn something today as well.
Right? Yeah, I learn from every guest. I learn so much from every guest. It's so great. I agree with what you said 100%. And that's why a lot of listeners like the show, because there's so many little tidbits. And sometimes they come out of nowhere. It's just like a throwaway line that maybe I say something or you say something that you not even think about. It just comes out. And then a listener somewhere goes, oh my God, really? And it changes their production. It's sick.
Yeah, it's like that. It's that light bulb moment where it's like, oh, dang.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So mission.org, you guys produce a bunch of different podcast shows. So it's basically a podcast network. And right now you have about 14 shows, a couple more on the way. A couple of the big ones. One of them is called Commerce Cloud, and the other one is called IT Visionaries. So anyway, I'll link to mission.org in the show notes. But you said how many hours of episodes are you publishing every week through mission.org?
So we publish every week between 8 and 10 hours of content. So we have
of episodes,
of actual episodes. So you can imagine how much we're actually recording every week in order to have that amount to publish is crazy. And we have some shows that publish twice a week. We have some shows that publish once a week, and we have some that publish every couple of weeks. So it's a constant juggling of making sure that the shows that are going out every 2 weeks, you have a good enough lead time. So if something happens, you can still have a show. And if something goes out once a week, maybe that's a little bit less of a priority, but you still have to make sure you have episodes in the can so that if someone gets fired from their job and you can't use their interview or whatever, you have to really plan for the future and plan ahead. So yeah, it's a lot of juggling. It's a lot of audio. It's a lot of content. But I mean, our team is awesome. Our producers are awesome. If you work with podcasting and you don't have the luxury of having a producer to schedule the interviews, create prep docs, work on the show notes. If you're doing all that and editing and creating intros and trailers, then God be with you in your quest, because that's craziness. So I'm super lucky to be in a team with awesome producers that do a lot of the grunt work before the interview. So then I can just actually focus on, if I'm doing content editing, doing the most baller content edits possible on that episode, and then making it sound as good as it possibly can sound. So yeah, I'm probably touching 85 to 90% of the audio that gets published to some degree.
Wow. And you're bringing me back to, I think it was 2016 when I was I produced 14 shows for the Forbes podcast network, and it was only for 7 or 8 months. It was just it was their foray into a podcast network kind of thing. Yeah. And it was unbelievable because it was 14 shows and it like your head spins.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
Yeah. Now, and were you doing prep docs, show notes, the interviews? Were you doing all of the legwork plus the production?
Actually, no. Okay. I was lucky in that sense because I've always been in podcasting. I've always stuck exclusively to the technical production. So just the audio. Like I can write, but it just takes me like 9 years to write 2 paragraphs.
Yep.
And the show prep is always up to the host. So yeah, I'm only working on the audio. So I'm definitely not even coming close to the workload that you just described.
Sure. Well, I mean, thank goodness I only do the technical side as well. Thank goodness. If I had to do all the other stuff, that it wouldn't be sustainable. And plus, I don't have that writing. I'm not a writer. That's just not how. I don't know. I'm just not built to write.
Yeah. So do you feel the same way about email that I do? Like, I hate emails going back and forth. It's like, I just want to, can we pick up the phone and talk for like 3 minutes, please?
Yes.
And cover everything, make the decisions, and be done with this conversation?
Yes. Yes, Chris. If have you had corporate gigs before? You probably had corporate gigs before where,
a few, yeah.
Where you get stuck on like a really simple action item, like who is going to call this person? And there's 19 people on the thread, and one person can't just say, hey, I'll reach out to them. It's got to be 19 people giving 19 responses. It's just like, dude, first of all, how about we can get on a conference call, or you can just call me and say, hey, do this. And so all that to say, I avoid long email threads. And especially with Mission being such a small team, it's super easy for us to just, if someone has a question, jump on Slack.
Yeah.
Reach out to the person directly, call them, send them a Slack message, whatever. That's the best way to do it. Definitely not long email threads.
That's rough. So we're going to do the speed round because we want to know what microphone setup you have and that you use, because you said you do occasional voiceovers and a couple little recordings, right?
Occasional, yeah.
Okay. And then, but I also want you to tell us about some of the hosts on the network on mission.org, because remember with Forbes, I had to manage 14 hosts with 14 different setups, which, by the way, guess what? I don't know if you know this. Regular listeners of the show might know this, but guess the producers or the people running the Forbes Podcast Network wanted to buy a microphone for each of the hosts. So guess what microphone do you think they bought and shipped to each of these hosts that I was producing shows
They
for?
all got Blue Yetis, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, baby. Exactly. And I was like, it's funny because for probably about a third of the shows, it was actually the correct mic choice, because they were going to be like one of them was a husband and wife. And it's like, all right, you want to get one mic? We could put the Blue Yeti in the figure 8 mode and
change
I'll
the
tell them where to put it.
pattern,
And it should work fine, actually. But most of the hosts, it was just one person. And so then I had to go through the whole training of how to use a Blue Yeti, which takes like an hour. You can't do this. Don't touch this. Don't do that. Put it up. Don't do this. And let's anyway. But your hosts, I want to know what equipment setups your hosts are using as well. So let's start with, let's do the speed round for you. What equipment setup do you personally have?
Let's do it. Don't judge my mic choice, Chris. All right, don't judge me.
It's a classic, dude.
It is. It's so okay. So here's the deal. I'll give you my setup, and then I'll tell you why I don't have like a really awesome microphone. So my mic, I just have an SM58. Keep it classic. It goes into an old school PreSonus Eureka mic pre. And I don't really do a huge amount of compression or EQ on the device. It's just to warm it up. And then it goes into a Focusrite 2i2, from the Focusrite 2i2 into my MacBook Pro. And then we do everything in Audition. So everything just goes right into Audition. I love using the iZotope RX7 bundle. We use that for pretty much everything. I have the Waves Platinum bundle, and I have the SSL channel strip plugins, which are great. And that's my personal setup every day.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean the 58. So let's just talk about it for a second, and then we'll get to your hosts.
Yep.
See, I muted myself and coughed, everybody. You didn't hear it, did you? See?
That's a professional.
All right. So you got the SM58. Look, yes, it's $100 microphone.
Yeah.
I think there's a bazillion of them that have been made and are used, but it's a good mic, man, right?
Yeah. Well, so here's the deal. I am in an apartment. I'm in a 2-bedroom apartment. It's can be somewhat loud. The only setup in my room that made sense was to have my desk next to a window. So, and you can hear stuff out the window occasionally, all that kind of stuff. So I already had this mic pre. So my thinking was like, I'm not going to do much VO work anyway. But when I do, I want a mic that's going to be ultra directional and that's going to reject a good amount of, noise from the side or behind it and all that kind of stuff. So I already had the 58 and thought, I'm gonna make it work. But here's the thing, and everyone, Chris, you've probably done this too. Test different setups. So I tested on my 58. I tested on an Audio-Technica ATR 2100 USB mic, and I actually tested on that new Shure MV7. That new USB mic they made. It's like the USB version of a SM7B.
Right.
And after all those tests, the 58 sounded the best. So
yeah, and the other thing about a 58 is like being an audio guy, I just like having a few microphones around,
for sure,
just in case.
For sure.
And a 58 and I have a 57 as well.
Oh,
and
dang.
I think they're pretty much exactly the same mic. It's just the form's a little different, right?
Yeah.
And it's just handy. It's like if I need to throw a mic on anything, I always have a good mic, at least a good mic handy, if not a better mic. So
yeah, 100%. We actually, I used to use 57s to mic up guitars in the studio. That was like my go-to guitar mic back in the day.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a good mic.
Okay, so then you got the PreSonus Eureka mic pre. So that's interesting. What is that? Was that like is it like a one rack space unit or is it a small thing?
One rack space unit. It's got an onboard compressor, onboard parametric EQ, and again, I like to, and you probably do as well, and most people, hopefully you do, you're trying to record as flat as possible. You're not trying to put a whole lot of effects on your voice when you print it because you can't do anything about that. So add that after you record as much as you can if you need to boost something or, lower something or whatever. So I really just use it to help get the 58 at a good warm level before it gets into my Focusrite. Because the mic pre's in the 2i2, they're not bad. Like you can totally use them, but a decent piece of outboard gear can work wonders for warming up your voice.
Yeah, so it's actually a channel strip. So it has the mic pre, it has compression and EQ, so that's good. And I mean, having a good channel strip is another thing that's just handy. It's like
absolutely.
You can plug any mic into that thing, and now if you need a little EQ, a little compression, you got it.
Yep, you got it.
So, all right, then you got the Focusrite 2i2.
Yep.
All right, I didn't press the cough button that time.
That's all right. No judgment here.
Focusrite is a sponsor of this show for another at least 3-4 months. And,
nice.
So the 2i2, and the whole Scarlett series, right? The Scarlett, that's the Scarlett series we're talking about. Like you said, the mic pre's are really good. They're not, I wouldn't say they're the best mic pre's in the world.
Sure.
And they don't have the most gain in the world, but they're very clean, I found.
Yeah, I agree. 100% agree. I think, in my opinion, I used to use an old, when I was using Pro Tools back in the day, I used to have like an old M-Box. Oh. And I kind of feel like these mic pre's are better than what was in the M-Box. Although this is also a newer piece of gear, so.
Yeah. Yeah, so all right, so you got the Focusrite. Then you got the MacBook Pro. How old is that about? How long have you had that?
Just over a year.
Oh, wow. Wait, so is it one of those the M processor, that new processor?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I don't know.
I don't know offhand. You know what? I think, so my brother works at Apple, or worked at Apple, and before I got this Mac, he was like, dude, you might want to wait because they're going to be doing this new computer, and I was like, dude, I don't want to mess with that. I just need to get a computer. So maybe I should have waited. I think this is the model before the one you're talking about.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, apparently that new, I should know what it's called, but I don't because
I should too.
I haven't bought that, but anyway, apparently, it has a little faster processing speed, but what you have can handle everything you need to do.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, so. That's the key. And you probably tell people all the time when they're buying gear is like, well, decide what you need first. Decide what you need to do what you need to do and then buy gear. Don't just buy gear and realize, crap, I could have spent less money and accomplished the same goals.
Yeah. I tell students of my school that all the time. I'm like, look, in the first few classes, I'm going to introduce a bunch of gear, but don't run out and buy stuff because maybe 2 weeks later, I'll show you a better piece of gear.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. So, be patient. Be patient.
Yeah. Okay. Great advice. Be patient. Matt Powell.
That's right.
2021.
Represent.
That's his. Is that your campaign slogan for president 2024?
That is 2024. And actually, I'd love for you to join me on my ticket, Chris, if you would. With some of the people that have been elected in past years, I think we could make a pretty good run.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I'll be the VP because I'm inevitably going to say a bunch of weird, crazy, provocative stuff, and you can be the president. You can just kind of stand there like very presidential and let me hammer everybody in the face.
Done and done. Which means I'm going to have to trim my beard so I don't look homeless.
No.
First homeless president.
I vote no on that.
All right, done. That's it. Let's go, 2024.
All right, let's
make it happen.
Someone print out some flyers, please. Thank you. All right, Adobe Audition. Well, look, what an amazing DAW. How long have you been using it?
I learned it specifically when I started doing this gig. So our mutual friend, Adam, Adam Clark, who took your course, and
Yes.
He talks very highly of you.
Sweet.
Him and I knew him in college, so we stayed in touch, and I had kind of gotten away from the audio production world and was in more of the corporate world. And as soon as he started getting more into podcasting, he said, "Hey, so we're going to need engineers and we're going to need people. So get your chops back up. But by the way, it has to be an Audition." So, I learned Audition specifically to start contracting for Mission. And at first I was a little nervous about it because I was like, man, Pro Tools was a big learning curve, especially not ever having touched a DAW before. But what I learned is every DAW is pretty similar. There's functionality that's a little bit different, the ways you get to places, the hotkeys, all that kind of stuff. But I found Audition to be a not super difficult to learn, basically. So, and I'm still learning, but yeah, Audition's great.
Yeah, I actually had a client who wanted a one-off episode done, and apparently the person who sort of assembled the entire episode assembled it in Adobe Audition, and they're like, "Hey, can you, can you produce this episode?" And I was like, "Well, I'm gonna have to get Audition."
Yeah,
which I was fine with.
Yeah,
but I did the same thing. I opened Audition, and it's a really good DAW, and it's laid out well, and things work. And if you can't find something, it doesn't take that long to find it.
100%.
As opposed to when I tried Logic Pro.
Oh gosh.
And I opened it and I was like, "Wait, what is this? What am I doing here? Hello, anyone?" And then I tried to click anywhere in the middle of the screen, and it wouldn't let me click.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, I want to put my cursor there." And they're like, "No, you can't."
Dude, I never got into Logic Pro, even back when I was trying to be a music producer, and I never got into Ableton. I just never, every time I would open it up, I'd be like, what? What am I looking at? But I was also a Pro Tools snob at the time too, so nothing could possibly be as great as Pro Tools. But even then, like their interfaces and their layout, for me, it just didn't vibe with me. So Audition, similar to you, as soon as I opened Audition, I was like, oh, I get it. I see where stuff is and multi-track and this and that and blah blah blah. So yeah, so and it's listen, it's really, if you're working at a company with other people who edit, like we have contractors that edit for us and do content editing. Shout out to Dan and David up in Canada. And it's a lot easier when you're sharing sessions to all use the same program.
Right.
So, and make sure that you all have the same plugins to some degree. Because if you're going to be opening up someone else's work, man, it can be a struggle to do that in a different program. So yeah, Audition's great, man. I've really dug it.
Yeah, and just for all the Logic Pro users out there, we're not bashing Logic Pro at all. Logic Pro is a perfectly fine DAW if you like it. If the tool suits you, then that's great. Go with it. Go for it. Like it depends on you as the engineer. You can use Logic Pro or Audition. Yep. You can still produce as just the same quality audio on both. Period.
Yeah. Chris, let me ask you this. Do you think that Logic is better as a music production program than as like someone who's just engineering? Like if someone's creating music, it seems like Logic is pretty great. But if you're not going to use that aspect of that program, it's probably not your first choice. What'd you think?
Yeah, I only opened Logic for literally 5 minutes. Yeah. And then I decided I'm not using this. And so I actually don't know. But I have used Ableton. I just recently bought the newest version of Ableton because I started, making some beats and started doing some stuff. Oh, and dang. Ableton is like, I know why you felt the way you did when you opened Ableton and you're like, what is this?
What am I looking at?
Ableton is not just a DAW. Ableton is... like the DAW part of it is like maybe a quarter of it. The majority of Ableton Live is creating beats and loops and like doing like almost like DJ stuff, doing live stuff, and it's like an instrument in itself.
Interesting.
For DJs and stuff. So it is a completely different animal. It's not just a straight up DAW at all.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. And so that's why I use it. I'll come up with a loop. I'll make a drum loop, and it's easy in Ableton to loop it. And then I could add more tracks, and I could play my keyboard and with different sounds, and that's what I do in Ableton.
Did you ever use Reason back in the day for audio production? No.
I may have used that one for a very short time, but not really.
It sounds like a cooler version of what Reason was, but Reason you couldn't, at least the old version, you couldn't record into it. You could just use it as basically an instrument. So, and you could record into it, and you could rewire it with other DAWs, but interesting.
Yeah, Ableton Live is just sick. That's a whole different animal, in my opinion. That's not just it's different.
No, I know. I've heard a lot of people love Ableton, especially if you're producing music. If you're making music, I think nowadays you pretty much use Ableton.
Right. Yeah, if you're doing loops and stuff, because you can do sick stuff. You can like merge loops. You can adjust the tempo on like you can automate anything, dude. Any knob on the screen in Ableton, you can literally, I think you just right click it and say automate, and then you can literally automate it and it's done. And I'm like, dude, there's so many cool things about it in terms of music production.
Dang.
Yeah. So, all right, before we get into the post-production, because we already started talking about Audition, but I want to talk to you about a little bit about RX-7, the Waves Platinum Bundle, and also the SSL Channel strips that you have. But before that, let's do the speed round for some of your hosts that are on the network, the mission.org network. So it just maybe walk us through a couple different hosts and what equipment setups they're using.
For sure. So we have a number of different hosts and a number of different setups. One of our main hosts uses an SM7B into a Cloudlifter that goes into a compressor, and I do not remember the model of the compressor, but into a compressor, and then I think she records in Ableton, but I could be wrong on that. And then we have a couple hosts that use the Blue Yeti, and thank goodness they were both already somewhat familiar with audio, so it wasn't a huge learning curve to make sure that they were in the proper room, make sure it was the proper polar pattern, make sure it was the proper distance from their face, make sure they didn't have a fan in there or anything like that, because those condenser mics, man, they will pick up stuff that you cannot even hear. So a couple people use that. Most of our hosts actually, while they're recording, they use QuickTime. They just record into QuickTime. Always record locally, peeps, as much as you can. I think one of our producers actually, I think she records directly into Audition. And I'm not sure what mic she uses, but I think it is another condenser mic. So all of our hosts pretty much have a different setup. And we'll have more hosts down the line who have other setups. And I think actually one of our hosts uses the equivalent of the 58, but it's an Audio-Technica mic.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I don't know which one that is. I'm thinking of my Sennheiser E835.
That actually might be what it is, because I'm picturing the all black one with the black top. That might actually be what it is, the Sennheiser. So, yeah, multiple different setups, and their voices all sound different.
And are they recording guests over the internet? And if so, what programs are they using to record that?
Yep, they are all recording guests over the internet. We use Zoom for pretty much every interview. Not ideal, mind you, but I was actually just having a conversation with one of our producers about this. The reason why we use Zoom is because it's easy, and because pretty much any person that you want to interview, especially someone who might be really busy, if they're looking at an invite and there's a whole list of things they have to prepare for the interview, if they see Zoom, it gives them peace of mind. Like, okay, I understand how to use Zoom. So we don't want to sacrifice audio quality, but you have to find that balance of audio quality and also giving a good guest experience to people who are giving up their time for free to be on a show.
Yeah.
Listen, I would love to send every guest a really good USB mic and make sure they record locally. And I mean, that would be what I would love. But for the amount of content we're pushing out and the amount of interviews, it's just not super realistic. So we have messed around with Squadcast a little bit, And I did do a little bit of messing around with Riverside FM. I think both of those are great. But yeah, for us, we're using Zoom on everything. And we do try to encourage local recording for guests if they're set up properly for it. Mm-hmm. And if it seems like they'll be open to that extra step. But we do have all of our guests 100% of the time record locally, which is key.
Right. Oh, no, your hosts.
Yes. Hosts are always recording locally.
Your hosts are always recording locally. That's great.
Yes.
Yeah, one thing I've found of using Squadcast and Zencaster in the years past, and today we're using Riverside.fm. By the way, this is the first episode of this show to be recorded using Riverside.fm. So, Matt Powell, you just made history today, brother.
That's what I do. I'm a history maker.
So yeah, so when I engineer sessions for clients, because when my clients record episodes, I'm actually there in the session with them. Do you do it that way, Matt?
No, I do not. We have occasionally, if I have been on some calls depending on the guest, but most of the time it's just the producer on the show with the guest. And sometimes the guest will have like a PR person or someone else in the room with them. But it's usually just the producer on the show, on the call, making
sure
that
the host, you mean?
Yeah, the host. I'm sorry.
The host.
Actually, no, Chris, I am all over the place. So the host is on the call, obviously, asking the questions. And then the producer also does join the calls as well.
Got it.
Just to make sure that their mic work is, if they have a mic, that they're speaking into it correctly. And if they have a beard like mine and they're, rubbing the mic on it, if they have even simple things like people that don't record stuff every day or use audio every day, they don't realize that they might have jewelry that's loud.
Oh,
and if you're shaking around while you're talking, you can't get rid of that. You really can't. So the producer's on there basically to help the guest know, hey, turn off that portable AC unit next to you. It's going to be really loud. So
stop clicking the pen.
Yeah,
I've actually had
the pen.
I had to ask one guest, a female guest, to take off her earrings because they were literally clinking and clanking.
Dude, yeah. One of the first episodes I edited as a contractor for Mission, the dude was on a treadmill.
Oh no! What?
Chris, I kid you not, he's on a treadmill. And it sounds like he's on a treadmill.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I remember listening to this, I'm like, am I being punked? This is a hazing for the new guy. Like, what is this? And I remember reaching out to Adam, who at the time was my boss, and I was like, so what do I do with this? Like, I mean, obviously you can't take out every, you can't remove all those. It's going to sound like the choppiest mess on the planet. So how do you navigate around that? And really it came down to like, you can't. The dude's on a treadmill. So you can only, your audio is only as good as the source. So I've had some crazy ones, man. I get it.
Oh. That's so funny. You thought they were punking you.
Dude, I was like, what in the world? Really? On a treadmill? You can't, listen, I respect someone's commitment to fitness, but you can't, you honestly can't take an hour out of your day and just, I don't know, have a seat.
Do you happen to remember what kind of microphone the guy was using? Or
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I actually don't even think it was a mic. I think he had ear pods. Or he had AirPods, or he had one of those treadmills with the stand like a desk, and he had his laptop on top of that, and then he was, getting his steps in while he was recording.
The only thing worse would be if he was using earbuds, like a wired earbuds with the mic on the wire, and that mic was just slapping all
bouncing
around.
Dude.
That's the only way that could have been worse.
Yeah, that would have been brutal. Either way, that took me about 19 hours to edit. But had you mixed in that microphone issue, it's a wrap. That would have been brutal.
Right. So, all right. So your hosts have,
wide
one
range.
One of them has an SM7B. One of them has a Yeti. So yeah, they just have. That's kind of what I would expect. Like people just having. very decent setups. I mean,
Sure.
well, the SM7B setup
Great.
that's a serious setup, but
Yep.
the Yeti's good. The Sennheiser, yeah, all pretty good stuff. So at least, I don't know. I always feel better when a host almost takes pride in
100%.
getting some good equipment and basically showing their dedication to their own show. Like I
100%. Yeah, and ours are all that way. All of ours, you do come across some people, especially when you interview, you've interacted with many more people in the industry than I have. You come across people that try to fight you on stuff. Like you try to give them advice on like, hey, go to a different room, or maybe record in your closet, or
Yeah.
if you really, really want to make the audio as good as it possibly can be, then do these things. And all of our hosts and producers are that way. Nice. Like none of them have egos about it. None of them fight. They're all like, man, let's make this as good as it possibly can be. Because it's all about the listener, man. That's who you're making the podcast for. You're not making it for you. So make it as good as you possibly can, and make sacrifices where you need to make sure you're getting the best quality audio you can get.
Right. And that brings me back to Zoom. So when I engineer sessions for clients, I always use either Squadcast or Zencastr or now Riverside. I use a service like that.
Yep.
But what you said before, you said Zoom is easy. And there have been times when I was using Squadcast or Zencastr where when the guests connected, there was a bunch of problems and confusion, and then it just took me so long to sound check them. I mean, some of these sound checks can take 20 or 30 minutes or 40, 50 minutes.
Yeah.
My longest sound check ever is an hour and 10 minutes. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, and then have fun interviewing that dude.
So that's why when you said that Zoom is easy for the guest, 100% agree. It's just I just have trouble with the audio quality. But wait, in Zoom, I think within the past year, they have this new high definition audio quality recording. Did you turn that? I'm sure you turned that on.
Yeah, we use that. It doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't make a huge difference, because everything is context, right? Like that might make a huge difference if someone has a good setup. But if someone doesn't, if someone is recording on earpods or AirPods, and we try to explain to people like, hey, if you want to get the best possible recording, use over-ear headphones. If you have to use the mic on your MacBook Pro or your computer, fine, it is what it is. But we try to coach people up as much as possible. But you just can't dictate that with people who have maybe they've never done an interview before. Maybe they've only been on Zoom calls. Maybe they've, there's this knowledge that they don't have. So it's really up to us. And it's, if you're a podcaster, you work for a podcast company, it's up to you to make sure that you're educating people as much as you can, and the guests that you have as much as you can, to not only make them comfortable, but to get the best possible recording. So all that to say, I don't think that button would make that much of a difference if all you're using is AirPods.
Got it.
So
now with the Zoom audio that you get, because you're the one doing post-production, when you get some Zoom audio that is absolute rubbish, that's a technical term, by the way.
It is indeed.
In my book. When you get a recording from Zoom that sounds like absolute rubbish, when you're doing post-production on it, what is your mindset there? Like, what are you trying to achieve? Because obviously you can't make it sound like a pristine voiceover. You can't. It's impossible. So what are your goals with a piece of just rubbish audio? Yeah.
So this is going to sound super ultra simple, but it really is my honest answer. I just try to think of the listener and think what would be tolerable. If I was a fan of this show, and the audio is usually really, really good, and we have this one-off episode where the audio is just super jacked up on the guest side, how do I make it so the listener will keep listening? And my thoughts for that is, first, address noise. If there's a lot of noise, address the noise first before you would do any EQing or anything like that, because if you don't address the noise first, you're just EQing noise. you're not really EQing the audio itself. So We always try to deal with the noise first. There's only so much you can do with that if it's really bad. Even with iZotope, which is great. Like the denoise, the voice denoise for iZotope is awesome. Like it does a really, really good job of getting rid of like ambient background noise. But that denoise isn't getting rid of someone knocking on the table or like you said, the jewelry, all that kind of stuff. My chair just dropped as I was talking. That's good. Classy. So that's what I would do when I get really bad audio. I just try to make it as tolerable as possible. And that could be like maybe try to identify what's the worst part of this audio. Maybe it's really bad S's. Maybe the S's are really, really, really piercing. And that's the first thing you think about as you listen to that audio. Address those S's first. See how much you can squash those S's without actually hurting the quality of the audio or making it sound like, the person has a lisp every time they say an S somewhere. Right. And just work the problem. Start at the top, find the worst part, and start from there. And you said it, you're not going to make it sound good. I mean, you're really not, at least from like an objective standard, you're not. But don't think about it from your perspective. Think about it from the listener's perspective. And I think that will kind of at least help you get through it and not obsess over something that you're not going to be able to fix. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, look, when you're preaching to the choir here when you talk about the listener experience, because that's it, man. That's literally it.
Yep.
Now, what do you do? I love the fact that you're addressing noise first before doing everything else. I love that. And then, but what do you do? How do you handle it if the guest not only sounds like rubbish, but also at the end of sentences trails off? And so not only does it sound like rubbish, but it just fades away into nothing. Like it just faded.
Dude, you're giving me PTSD right now thinking about some of this, because that is a regular occurrence. So this is what I would do with that. And, the crazy thing about audio is I'll do something one way, you'll do something different, someone else will do something completely different. Someone else will hear all those three and say, you're all idiots. This is the way to do it. Ultimately, you just got to find the flow that works for you.
Right.
What I've found is you can do one of two things. See if you can actually just cut that out entirely. Huh. See if you can cut the spot where they trail off without losing context of the interview. Chances are you can, because most people, the way that they speak, they tend to say the same thing 3 or 4 times at the end of a statement. Right. And you can oftentimes find a place to cut it before they trail off.
That's so interesting. I never thought of that.
That would be my first. If I was looking at a session or an audio where that happened, that would be my first thought. Is I'm going to go back in the statement a little while and see if there's a place I can cut before they trail. Right. And it's important. You can't just make random cuts because you don't want to lose the context. Maybe it's a really important answer. So you got to make sure you're paying attention to what you cut. But that would be my first thing I would do is what can I cut? And the second thing I would do is I would make some points in the audio, and I would just raise that up gradually until
like automate the volume up.
Exactly. Automate the volume on the actual track. I wouldn't use the they're called waypoints in Audition. I forget what they're actually called in Pro Tools. It's been so long, but I'd make some waypoints and then lift that audio as much as I can, which you have to be careful about because you don't want to push it so much that it peaks. So that will be my second way to try to fix that.
Right.
Sometimes it works. The reality is sometimes it doesn't. And if someone is unintelligible on top of the fact that they're drifting from the mic, there's just not a whole lot you can do with that. I mean, what would you do?
For that specific problem, I would use compression because I tend to use compression on a lot of things. Unless it's a Skype call, which is already absolutely destroyed with compression.
Sure.
Using a compressor will help even that out. It just helps a little bit. It doesn't solve it. But I also use Vocal Rider from Waves. It's a Vocal Rider plugin, which you can sort of set it so that it automatically will push someone up if they start to get really low. So that's another, and it's a combination of all the things, right? Because it's I'm using a bunch of plugins, and it really matters what order you use them in, and all that. And so I don't manually. I don't make points and manually raise volumes.
Yeah.
Really
tedious.
ever. No,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. When I fade music, I do.
Yeah,
fade
yeah,
in
yeah.
music and fade out
100%.
music.
You have
I
to.
Use,
Yeah.
I use those points. But on a person's voice in a podcast, I usually don't use points and to make the volume go up and down, automate.
Yeah, that makes sense. We actually, I think I totally missed this, and when I first started to answer your question, we do actually, when we get audio from host and guest, we actually do run it through a quick, like a post-processing. We do a little bit of compression, we do a little bit of EQ, we do a little bit of denoise, and we actually process it before we bring it into the multi-track to edit. So there is a little bit of compression that we use, but I'm actually thinking that maybe your way of doing it is wiser, especially if you can listen to it before you process and you can find those points. Shoot, maybe you could even bring that section, cut that section, bring it into the multi-track and process it in different ways and find the sweet spot. I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't work too, but interesting.
Yeah, a lot of ways to try to overcome an issue like that. So
yeah.
And it changes from episode to episode too. That's 100%. The thing.
And voice to voice. Yep.
Yeah, voice to voice. Yeah. Well, that's actually the correct way to say it. Voice to voice. Yeah.
Well, as president, I have to, got to call you out, man.
Hold on. Barry's here. I want to ask him something. Barry, do you think Matt and I have a chance in the 2024 election?
No way. You crazy?
Barry, why are you being all negative, man?
Ridiculous. How dare he?
Barry, how Barry, looking at our campaign right now, Matt Powell and Chris Curran, 2024, how would you describe our campaign right now, just by what you see?
There's no activity, no giggle, no nothing.
Really? There's no giggle,
Unreal.
no nothing. Oh,
unreal. Barry's crazy. I'm offended.
I'm offended. So, yeah. All right. So let's get to the post-production then. So you already mentioned a bunch of it, but okay. So we're talking about Audition and everything. And now you mentioned RX, the Waves plugins, and the SSL channel strips. Let's talk about post-production. So when you get raw files from one of your hosts at mission.org, you said you just process each one separately first before you bring it into the DAW?
Yes. I know that sounds crazy offhand, but so the first thing I would do when I'm getting raw audio that has not been touched or imported into Audition, I'll scrub through it first. I won't listen to the whole thing, but I'll scrub through it just to make sure it sounds somewhat normal. And after you've done a bunch of interviews, you kind of know what sounds like it's going to process correctly. Right. So I always do that before processing, because sometimes you'll get some noise or some digital artifacts in that audio that you don't want to necessarily run through compression and through processing. So that's actually rare for us. We typically don't have audio that's so bad that we can't process it. But so I can't even take credit for what we do processing wise. Adam Clark, who got me this gig, he was in my position before me, so he had all these processes set up, so it was a really easy transition when he moved on to start his own company and I took his position. We already had these really, really good policies and procedures set up in audio processing. So yeah, we run some compression on it. We run it through denoise. We do a little bit of EQ. Nothing crazy. Nothing super extreme. Because we don't want to change the sound of that person's voice before we actually start editing. Because if you put a huge, low cut on there or a really extreme high cut, you're cutting really good frequencies depending on where you shelf it. So we don't do anything super extreme. And we've found that the way that we have our processing set up, it pretty much works for like 90% of the audio that we use to just get that level raised and make it sound like it's broadcast volume, and then we can start to edit. So and the other thing too, I would say, because a lot of people, when I've talked to other people in the business, they'll say, well, you're doing destructive processing and you don't want to do destructive processing because then you'll find something that maybe you don't want in the audio and it's too late. My pushback would be, if there is some noise on the track you might not hear it until you process it.
Right.
So you got to be able to have it at a decent enough volume to edit properly. And so that's what we do. It works really well for us. And and it's nice to have presets already ready to go, where you drop your audio in, you have a favorite set up, boom, hit the favorite, process it, bring it in, get cracking.
Right. And so do you do all of that in iZotope RX?
I actually do it within Audition.
Okay.
And then I have a chain set up, like a favorite set up with all of those plugins already set where I want them. And RX voice denoise is just a part of that chain.
Got it. Okay, so you have an Adobe Audition session.
Yep.
You bring in the raw file. You have a bunch of plugins set up. You have your settings, and you process it that way. And then the output of that, you bring into a new Adobe Audition session.
Yep.
For the actual episode of the podcast.
Yep. For every episode has its own session. They're all in stereo. I think it's all 44.1, 24-bit. On every session, we have a master bus with a hard limiter on it. Nothing too extreme. When you said, you spoke to my heart when you talked about, bringing already compressed audio in and then recompressing. I can't stand that, because the way that Zoom compresses the audio through the cloud can be really brutal if you're processing after that. So you got to be really careful of that. But yeah, we bring everything into the session. Every session is set up the same way. So if a contractor is working on an episode that I need to add an intro to, or adjust the music to, adjust the intro, whatever it might be, then I can open his session and I know that his parameters are going to be exactly like mine.
That's pretty cool, man.
It's important, man. Workflow is important. It saves a lot of time, especially if you're sharing sessions with people.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's cool. So then when you finally set up the session for the episode, I'm assuming you have templates for episodes with the intro music and all that.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely. Every show has its own template. Every show has its theme song that's already, it will adjust time-wise because someone's intro might be a little bit longer or shorter than another. So you have to find good points in that intro music to chop it up and not make it sound weird. But we do have those templates set up for every show. So there will be some adjusting that's necessary, but everything is pretty much set.
Right.
So you know exactly where the music needs to change to keep the fades where they should be and to make sure the music still flows appropriately. Because the one thing I love doing, especially with the more music background, I love messing with theme songs and making sure the theme song hits exactly as it should hit. Right. And not just, for any podcaster out there, if you want to sound unique and better than 90% of people, just make sure you pick really good music. Don't just drop it in and leave it. Find the best spots in that song. And if you have to loop certain spots, loop those spots. If you have to cut certain spots, cut those spots. But be really intentional. That's the word I was looking for. Be very intentional with the music you use and the fades that you use, and you will already sound better than many podcasters out there who just drop a song in, don't adjust the level, let it play. There's no thought as to when the voice comes in, when the intro starts. So I love doing that kind of stuff.
I'm going to applaud that. I love that. I love that. I just love that. I need to applaud that because
Thank you.
There's nothing that screams amateur like when you press play on a podcast and the music comes in. Usually it's either way too loud or way too soft. And the fade is horribly abrupt and it's like what is happening here?
Or the fade is like way before the person ever comes in or way after. And it's like, no. I mean, the way it was described to me is when you're fading, if you're messing with the theme song, you're finding the best point in that song for the voiceover to hit or for the intro to hit. Try to hide the fade as much as you can. You don't really want to hear the fade necessarily. It needs to be there, and you need to be able to distinguish between the vocal and the music. But there is a way to just try to hide that fade so it's there, but it's not a distraction in the actual intro.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff.
Dude, that is so... That's an advanced concept in podcasting for sure.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's what I do. I usually my fades are very long because that's what I want. I just want the music to I want it to disappear without anybody knowing it disappeared.
Yeah.
And then
100%.
they don't even notice.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and the other thing too is if you have all of our shows have a different theme song that fits the vibe of the show. As much as we can. It's a very philosophical, like how do you fit music to a vibe of a show? You totally can. If the host is pretty high energy, and if the show tends to be high energy, well, you don't want like a down tempo, depressing, weird sounding song. It's not going to fit the vibe of that show. So it's really important if you're picking a theme song, make sure it fits. Think about the audience that will be listening to that podcast. And then if there's a song that has a 20-second intro and then maybe it builds and then there's a beat that hits at maybe 50 seconds, well, adjust that intro so that beat hits after you introduce the show.
Right.
And then that way it will flow with the music as opposed to fighting the music and sounding like, the snare just hit, but then he starts talking like 10 seconds after. It doesn't work. So those are all things to think about with music. And it's not going to be perfect. One of the things that I've found that I'm still learning how to do is if I'm creating an intro or if I'm making a trailer, like I'm going to be making a trailer for one of our new shows in the coming weeks, be very careful where you make your cuts, because if that cut, like if you cut, let's say you have like an 8-bar, 16-bar loop that you think you'll be able to use down the road,
right.
Be careful, because if the audio or if the guest or host audio ends in the middle of that 16 bars, where are you going to make the cut to make it make sense?
Right.
So I'm still learning how to do that and plan ahead so that a cut I make for episode 1 would still work well for episode 2, and so on and so forth. And that's tough, man. It's not easy to do that, but I think it is important, and it will make your show sound better.
100%. That's great stuff, man. I know there's a
Thanks, man.
client I have, they actually take some breaks in their like a commercial break in their podcast, which I don't love that. In theory, I don't like that at all, because maybe I'm old school, but I think a podcast is just like, it's just like, hey, let's talk, and that's it. Sure. I don't even want ads. I don't want anything. But anyway, when they come back from an ad, the music starts, and then it's, there's like a drum fill, and then there's the downbeat.
Yep.
And then right after the downbeat, right after the first snare is when I have her voice come in.
There you go.
Because the music builds, it punches, and then like maybe 1 second later,
yep,
like right after the down, like, because you have to let the music hit. Yep. Like it builds up and it hits, and you can't step on that. You have to let it hit and then immediately bring in the host, and it
100%.
just works great.
Yeah, it works. Those, you have to think about those things. And we actually just started using Simplecast for uploading or for publishing all of our shows.
Nice. And
we started messing around with dynamic ad reads, and they're actually pretty cool. Like the whole idea of a dynamic ad read. If people aren't familiar with it, I'm sure you are. It's where you would if you want a mid-roll ad read in a show, but you don't want to have to physically put it in the session each show, you can create a point in Simplecast at, let's say, if you want every ad read to be around 20 minutes, boom, you set that point, and then it will insert an ad to start at 20 minutes.
Right.
And we actually produced little mini ads that start at a certain point in the show. And it's interesting because you have to pay attention to music there. You don't want it just to blare. You don't want it to be super awkward. You don't want it to take the listener out of the vibe of listening to the show.
Yeah.
Because it is an ad, and ads aren't necessarily ideal in anything ever. If you're watching TV, who loves commercials? So do what you can to make it sound as natural as possible with the vibe of the show. So yeah, all really important things to think through.
Yeah, the dynamic ad insertion, like, you got to be careful how you go into it and how 100%. You come out of it.
Yes.
One thing I listened to, I can't remember which podcast, like maybe a podcast from Pushkin or something, but sometimes when they do the ads, they will actually leave a bunch of space. Like, I'm talking like 4 or 5 seconds of silence.
Interesting.
But the way they bring the vibe down, and then there's the silence, it actually works.
Interesting.
It almost fascinates me how you can almost manipulate someone's emotions, and they do it because they'll bring it down, and then they'll be like, I don't know if it's before or after the break or both, but there's just a long, like, again, 4 or 5 seconds is like an eternity of silence.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So, but it works though. It kind of provides a little buffer. But you couldn't do that with a high energy show, though. You could, like a high energy show, you'd have to go right in. But if it's kind of chill, you can stretch it out a little.
I think you nailed it. I think it's all context. I'll have to listen. I have listened to some of their stuff on and off, but I'll have to go back and check that out, because that is, if a show is low energy, you have more room to kind of put little pauses here and there, and it doesn't actually disrupt the flow. So. Interesting. That's a good point by you. I'm going to have to check that out.
It's just observation. All right, so you're using the Waves Platinum Bundle. Well, let's talk about everything. So you got the SSL channel strip, you got Waves stuff. Well, your SSL channel strip plugin, is that the Waves version of that plugin?
Yeah, it's the Waves version, yeah.
Okay, so what are a bunch of the Waves plugins that you're using besides the SSL? By the way, is it the SSL E or G?
I think it's the G.
The G, oh yeah.
Which is what I learned on back in the day.
Really?
Yeah, we had in my school had SSL and Neves.
Nice.
That we learned on.
What Neve?
I don't remember.
Okay.
All I remember is that I sucked at it. At using the Neve. So SSL made a little more sense to me. Neve was like, what in the world?
So the SSL G console.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
the G
cool,
console,
yeah.
and it also has the plugin has the master bus compressor. I don't use that much, but it's just cool that it's there.
Yeah.
I really like. I don't go too crazy with plugins. I use iZotope 90% of the time, and even the onboard plugins that Audition has are pretty good. But one I find myself going to all the time, Waves wise, is the Bomb Factory compressor. What is it? BF7 something crap. I should know the name, but it's a really simple compressor, and it just sounds really good. It's just 2 knobs. I can picture it now. Just 2 knobs, and it's just really easy to use. So I really like that one a lot. I used to use their Ultra Maximizer limiter. I think that's what it's called, is Ultra Maximizer. I don't anymore. I just use the one that's in Audition, and it works fine.
Right.
But I don't use Waves as much anymore now that I'm in Audition. I used it more when I was using Pro Tools.
Got it.
So, but they're still there, and I still like using them. But I don't fill it up with Waves as much.
And as far as like Adobe Audition built-in plugins there, which ones are you using there?
I like their parametric EQ quite a bit. It's a lot like the Pro Tools parametric EQ. I use that especially for doing low cut and high cut and filters. They have some really cool notch filters that I'll use, because we'll occasionally have audio where there's a electrical hum or a hum that's coming from somewhere. And I found that for lots of those hums, throw on a notch filter, hit it at 120 hertz, boom, get rid of that hum, and it doesn't really degrade any of the quality of the audio.
Right.
So I use the notch filters quite a bit for really noisy audio, but I would say 90% of the time, all I'm using is the iZotope.
Yeah. Yeah, the iZotope RX, it does have a de-hum.
Yes, the de-hum. And you know what I found with iZotope is sometimes sometimes the de-hum works really, really well. Sometimes it doesn't. Same thing with the de-reverb. Sometimes I found the de-reverb works really well, and sometimes I found that it doesn't do anything and just makes the audio sound super janky. So, yeah, there's a couple other decrackle. I found the same thing. Sometimes decrackle is awesome, and it completely gets rid of any crackle noises that you have without making the audio sound weird, and sometimes it does nothing. So I don't know why that is, but I found that they are great, but sometimes they work better than other times for whatever reason.
Yeah, the de-hum, the only issue I've ever had with the de-hum in iZotope RX is that when you click that button to find the hum, like it'll scan for the hums.
Yes.
You might see a hum on the screen that is clear as day, but when you hit find, it'll find some other frequency. And you're like, no, dude, I want that one. And there's no way to tell it that's the one I want.
Yeah.
So then sometimes what I have to do is use my cursor to hover over it. And try to figure out exactly what frequency is and then put that number in by hand.
Yep.
Anyway, and then the de-reverb, I hear you on that. I think that I have never had a problem with de-reverb, and I think I'm sure you're doing this, but what you can do is you learn the whole file. Yeah. So yeah, I've never had a problem with the de-reverb.
It's possible that I'm not using it correctly, because when I've used de-reverb in the past, I usually am within the multi-track and I select like a portion of the audio, but maybe where it's at its worst. And then I do learn. Maybe it's not learning enough.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I need to run it into RX, just the audio into RX, and run the whole audio file as opposed to a section. I might just be screwing that up. That might be user error, which would not be the first time.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, because the whole file. So just so you know, you might know this, but before I set up my session for each episode, I first clean up all the raw tracks. I use iZotope RX, but I use the standalone version. So I'll bring in each file separately into RX, the standalone version, and then I'll just do what I need to do. If there's hums, I'll take them out. If there's no hums, I won't use the de-hum. Like I literally do it manually for every voice. And so that's when you click learn on any of the iZotope modules, it can scan the whole thing. Or if you're just scanning silence, you can highlight a bunch of silence and hit scan if you're doing like a denoise or something.
Yeah. So that's a good tip, man. I'm gonna, next time I get some really jacked up audio, especially if it's reverby, I'm gonna try that.
Yeah, because when you open it in RX, like I just have the feeling, like I call it the cleanup phase. Like I'm not doing any EQ or compression or nothing like that.
Yeah.
I'm literally just fixing mistakes.
Just noise. Yeah.
And once the mistakes are fixed, then I save that file, obviously.
Yeah.
As a new file name, right? In addition to the original.
Yeah.
Never overwrite the original, everybody, obviously. And then I bring the processed one into my DAW.
Yeah.
And then I use EQ compression, and then I mix it. I mix it like a record. That's how my mind mixes a podcast episode.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes sense. You made a lot of records. You're blowing my mind right now. I'm gonna try that the next time I have maybe really, really bad audio. Because it's funny, you said you mix it like a record. I use it the way I used to use Pro Tools. And the way I used Pro Tools was everything was RTAS. So everything is on the track. So that's what makes sense to me. It makes sense to me to bring the audio in, put it in the multi-track, and then select each plugin that might, accomplish the goal that I'm looking for. But it does make sense to do it the way that you're saying first, especially the noise aspect of it and the mistakes aspect of it. I'm going to try that.
Yeah. Cool.
That's a good call.
So Matt Powell, this has been awesome. Well, now that I'm your running mate for 2024.
Yes, absolutely.
And what was the slogan? Was be patient, I think you said.
Be patient.
Yeah, I love that. So anyway,
that's a good message for all of us.
So, dude, seriously, thank you. This has been amazing. I love what you're doing. I always love talking to people like you who have just a ton of experience and a lot of ideas. You know, it's all about ideas and solutions and creativity with solutions, and it's so cool. I just love talking about this stuff. So thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
No, dude, you're an OG. So thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Like I said, I'm not kidding. When I was growing up, I wanted to do what you did in the 90s, just making records. So I appreciate what you do. And if I could add, anyone listening to the show who is either into engineering and looking for more contract work, or they consider themselves to be a great content editor or great with music or whatever, you can find us at mission.org on LinkedIn. You can email me, matt@mission.org, because we're always looking for really good engineers and really good content editors. So don't be shy and reach out to me.
That's cool. So, all right, well, I'll have a link in the show notes if you want to give me something where people can go to and, you know.
Yeah. They can actually, you know, I wrote it down because I'm a professional. They can go to, our Twitter is @MissionHQ. Nice. And our LinkedIn is just mission.org.
Cool. So, yeah, so if anybody wants to pick up some new work, go apply. Yeah, this has been just awesome, and I'll start the outro music. And by the way, so first of all, thank you everybody for listening. But Matt, thank you for being here. This has been awesome, dude.
A pleasure. Thank you.
And of course, at the end, what I normally do with guests is we both yell, "Sound great." And
just sound great. They say sound great.
Yeah. We're gonna yell. I'll be like, I'll say, "Okay, go," and then we'll both yell, "Sound great." And
cool.
Of course, you know the objective is to distort the crap out of your microphone. Okay,
that should be easy.
That's what we want to do.
Okay.
Oh, we missed it. All right, let's do it. Go.
Sound great. Nailed it.
Does it mean it's still the